when we go live on, the thing for the reasons.
What is the reason that we are going live today?
I don't know, something about helping people. I don't know. I've never really understood, but people keep coming. So, I'm guessing that there's something here, right? There must be.
There must be.
There must be. There's no other explanation whatsoever. So,
Maybe they just come for the comedic relief.
we'll do our best to provide that today. Yes, we will. Well, welcome to our live office hours. For those of you just joining for the first time, or maybe watching a replay, we answer your questions about anything startup related. We invite you into the Traction Lab to chuck your most pressing, difficult questions at us for us to attempt to answer to you. And you can submit your questions right into the chat. We always prioritize the live ones. But if you want a little bit more breathing room, then you can get in a tiny little chat. Then you can go to jdm.bio, click the calendar, and there's a form you can fill out to send a question in advance, provide a little bit more detail, a little bit more substance. We have some of those, because you guys were awesome enough to send some questions in advance. We only have 4 today, subject to the holiday probably there, but we've got 4 of them, and that is plenty for us to have a little bit of fun. Cameron, have you warmed up the chat?
No, I'm out of practice. That 1 week off, and who knows
what happens. This is what happens when we get that week of tryptophan. And are you still on your Thanksgiving sandwiches?
No, we only had one round of them. So
1 round of them. All right.
what about you? Are you still working your way through pounds of turkey?
Well, we had a relatively small gathering here. It was just the 3 of us and my mother-in-law, so we didn't have as much. We didn't make a full turkey. We just made turkey breast, but yeah, we still have a little bit left over. So still working through it, but that's the way it it do be like that. I have been if I'm a little bit muted here, it's because I've been working my way through an obscene number of startup applications for South by Southwest. Cameron and I are both on the pitch review advisory board, so we review. We're among the group of people who review I think it's probably a few thousand applicants that they get, and we each review somewhere between 75 and 150 applications. So it's a lot. There's a lot to go through, and not that I'm going to let my ADHD show too much, but the deadline is today. So I'm still working my way through, as one does.
Yeah, I still got more to do too. So
yeah, I mean, here we are. But we'll dive in. We've got our 4 questions, so we'll pick a starting point with the 4-sided die. I have the autofocus set to track on my face, so that's why it's not adjusting to that. But it is. I'll put it back here so it's in focus, even though it's far away. There's your 4-sided die. Rolling it. Boom. Starting with question number 4. That wasn't very interesting, but all right.
It's always the case, I feel like.
Yeah, I know. The gods, they do this to us. So with that. B2B SaaS for life coaches at the unpaid pilot stage. And they define life coaches as career, relationship, and wellness coaches. So a whole group from there. All right, we have 18 life coaches testing our client management and session notes platform. They like it fine. That's not high praise, but all right. That's the problem, though. They like it just fine. Nobody's passionate about it. When we ask them if they'd pay $50 a month when the pilot ends, we get a lot of probably and maybe, which basically means no. Kudos for catching that. The features work, the UX is clean, but there's no excitement. How do you create urgency or emotional buy-in for productivity software? Or do we just need to find a different customer segment that cares more? Life coaching is sort of a loosey-goosey industry. Coaches tend to be more about intuition, relationships, and systems and processes. Maybe we're selling to the wrong personality type. Well, I have a couple of thoughts here. So you've read the room correctly, right? They don't want your shit. Or at least they're not going to pay for it. So there's that. However, I am seeing a little special pleading happening here. So we've got there's one like, oh, they don't really want it. So how do we create urgency and emotional buy-in for productivity software? So you're kind of blaming the category when there's plenty of productivity software out there that captures that urgency and severity and that people sign up for. So there's that. And then the part about the customer segment, we'll come back to that in just a second. And you also, kind of blame the victim a little bit here by saying, oh, they're loosey-goosey, and like maybe it's just because of the way that life coaching works. And I don't imagine that that's true, because you got them to sign up in the first place. So there was something about the value proposition that did in fact resonate with them, and it's not resonating with them here, or much anymore, or at least enough to pay $50 a month when the pilot ends. So I kind of want to lay that groundwork there, and then also say that you're calling it a pilot, but I don't think it was a pilot.
Just a free trial.
I think it was a free trial. You gave them a free trial, and
free. You gave it to them for free, and then you're going to ask them to pay later.
Right. It was an open-ended, completely ill-defined free trial. Was what you gave them. Pilots have terms, and this didn't have. It doesn't sound like it had any terms. So. I do have thoughts on the specific question about customer segments, but since I rambled for a bit, I'm sure, Cameron, you have thoughts, so I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I don't have, nothing too crazy here. I think they're speaking to what they're seeing, but they're maybe not taking action on on what they're saying. So they're identifying that there isn't the urgency. They're not necessarily bought in. So you're kind of highlighting that. And so then it's like, oh, well, how do we force it to happen when it's versus how you maybe either find those that do have the urgency or, kind of move to a different place. But I think you kind of have called it out, and then you're not making a decision based on that data. It seems like you're trying to find new data to back it up versus the data that's been given. How do we make a decision to try something different or explore something out there in addition to what's been offered? So that's kind of my first take. I think there's a little bit of the blame game, but I think anytime you have convince, or how do we make them, or how do we create urgency, there are ways that you can do that more on a trial element of it, or hey, it's a 7-day trial and then you have to pay after that. That's one way to create some urgency. But I think the big gap is I'm not seeing the quantifiable impact to your customer's life. You said, yeah, it's productivity, but what does that mean? Is it $50 a month? You got to be saving them a lot of time, or helping them, what's the ROI for them in terms of that investment? That seems at least a decent amount for a productivity tool. And so how are they getting the return times, whatever they're already currently doing? So that would be where I would be curious is, one, the lack of urgency, then what's the severity of the problem that you're solving, and how are you quantifying that?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I also part of this urgency promotion, or this we're going to instigate some urgency here. I think part of that comes from two different senses of the word urgency. And so there's the marketing and sales urgency, where it's for a limited time, where you put some boundaries and you create some time pressure on a situation. And so that's a sense of creating urgency to close deals, to increase the close rate of deals. But that's not the kind of urgency that, when we're talking about creating urgency, or we're talking about there being urgency or need for urgency, we're really not talking about that. What we're talking about is an inherent condition that the customer has around the problem. The problem itself is urgent and necessitates an urgent solution. And so that is what we're talking about here. You cannot create that kind of urgency. It either exists or it doesn't. And as soon as you have to make them realize that it's urgent, that's you confessing that it wasn't. And so by creating urgency, you can increase your close rate a little bit, but you're not going to find customers that you wouldn't otherwise find. You're not going to make a business where otherwise there wasn't one. You can improve profitability. That's basically it. So I just kind of wanted to call that distinction out between those two different senses of the word urgency. I think exploring a different customer segment is interesting. I would also be curious as to, they saying they like it fine, and probably maybe mean no. What are they getting out of it? Why did they sign up? And if we instituted payment, they're going to churn. And so the question is why? Why are they going to churn? Are they going to churn because they weren't getting the value that they thought that they were going to get, that they thought they were going to get something different, that they thought they were going to get more? What is the reason here that you got 18 of them to say yes, and now they're not saying yes anymore, or at least not saying yes to the tune of $50 a month? And so I think some conversations with these 18 people is going to be important for figuring that out. The other thing is, I think you may be onto something, like I poked a little fun of it a little bit, but this idea of life coaching being loosey-goosey, like you're talking about something that sounds very formal, like session notes, and maybe client management is a little bit less so. And I think it's going to depend on the kinds of coaching that one does. But for example, therapists, like a mental health therapist, LMFT, psychologists, etc., sometimes social workers are legally mandated to keep session notes. And there's a lot of regulation around what they have to do there. And so there are tools that help those that customer segment do client management and session notes already. And there's an industry for that. And so I'm blanking on the biggest one for therapists, but there's a really big common web app platform that customers can use to book sessions, and then make their payments, and then therapists can manage the session notes inside there, and do the whole thing inside of that whole tool. But so there are some of those tools out there that people are paying for, and it's because, again, there's regulatory pressure that they have to do that. And before the tool, they were doing that all on paper, which for some therapists is perfectly fine. They like their paper systems, and others don't. They want something digital. So anyway, so if we switch back to something that's more loosey-goosey, like does that lack of regulatory pressure then say that, okay, well, then they don't have any motivation for doing that kind of tracking and session notes? Or is it it's a different type of them that do and don't? So for example, does an executive coach, which would probably be offended if you called them a life coach, but like if you were looking at an executive coach, are they keeping session notes because it's really important for them to remember specific details about the companies and businesses that they're working with? Example. So I would try to figure out, it might not be like that it's just this life coach category that doesn't work, but that there are specific segments within that category that might work better. So I'd say maybe can you get at this with focus, break down those 18 life coaches. Can you get any of them to convert? If you can, what are the ones that look, how do they look different than the ones that didn't, and so forth.
Perfect.
All right. Well, if you got a question in the chat, drop it into the chat. We do prioritize live questions, but we are working our way through the questions that were submitted in advance. If you want a little bit more breathing room, then you get a little comment, jdm.bio, hit the calendar button. There's a form you can fill out to submit your question in advance. Thank you to those of you who did. We still have 3 left. We might get through them all, unless you guys have weaned off the tryptophan and are ready to drop a question in the chat, in which case we will prioritize those. So should we just go in order, Cameron?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. This is B2B SaaS for food bloggers that are monetizing through ads and sponsored content. All right, sounds typical. They're at the paid pilot stage, and they say they built a content calendar and sponsor management tool for food bloggers. They have 22 of them that are paying $40 a month in pilots. I don't know why they're pilots, but okay. They're using it daily. They love it. But here's what's killing me. Food bloggers talk to each other all the time in capital letters. Just want to make sure that emotion came through. Like constantly. In Facebook groups, on Instagram, at conferences, we should be getting referrals left and right, but we're not. When we ask why they're not telling their blogger friends about us, they kind of shrug and say, oh yeah, I should do that. Why isn't word of mouth happening naturally in such a connected community? Our satisfaction scores are really high. NPS is like 65, but referrals are basically 0. Do we need to incentivize referrals, or is there something else going on? Cameron, what do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting one for sure. So, I mean, great. You got paying customers. It seems like they're getting value. Yeah, you haven't necessarily pulled on the lever of referrals yet. I think, I guess my first thought is like, you're at the paid pilot stage, like, do we feel like referrals is the right lever to be focusing on versus like getting throughput related to our existing customers? So, I don't know how long they've been customers currently. So if it's only been like a month or something, hey, that's great. They're maybe getting some initial value, but maybe they're waiting for some sort of like ROI to be met based on their sponsorship goals or whatever that might be. So I think there's some maybe longitudinal components of it, but I think for me there's still a risk of like, how do you get in front of more of them versus just purely referrals? I think obviously you want to pull on that lever at some point, but I think for your engine for growth, there's still got to be, I'd be curious of how well you're converting at the top of the funnel. Would be kind of a question I would follow up on. In relation to the referral component of it, I think there is an interesting question of why aren't they referring it? And so it could be like, is it a competitive thing where, they all talk to each other, but, if they're doing better for whatever reason, do they want to refer things for that particular reason? Or is it just also, the maybe more blatant example is just maybe they're not getting that much value out of it that they are hesitant on referring someone. But I don't, I think the net promoter score for your initial customers being 65, like, yeah, it's great. They're not detracting, but it's also not like, I don't know, it's not 90 something. So, that's something to maybe focus on. But I think sometimes is like, have you given them a link or anything? Like, what do they get out of the referral process? And is it, what's the mechanic in order for them to do so? So do they get anything out of that as well? So I guess from the incentive structure, but what about you, JDM?
I think you pretty well covered all the things that I would cover. I think on the net promoter score, like 65 is a pretty good net promoter score. But the idea of a promoter is that they promote you and they're not. And that's interesting. So, that 65, basically what we're saying is like 65, percent are going to actively, promote you. Of those who would be getting rid of the neutrals. So that's pretty good. That's good. That's great. But they're not actually doing it. And so, there's some interesting questions around the mechanics and you don't necessarily need to incentivize it, maybe, but to your point, Cameron, do they even have a mechanism of doing it? Is there a thing, or is it just dropping the name? Why aren't they dropping the name? And that leads me to kind of believe that they're getting some value out of it, but not enough that they're willing to put their reputation behind it. And so I think that's probably, you only have 22 bloggers, so I would have all the questions. The other thing I would say is you still have them in pilots, and why, and how do we get them out of pilots? And I think that we're probably also going to learn some interesting things about that too, because these pilots sound open-ended.
Well, I think also just do we have the mechanism to even know if new customers are referrals or not? So say they sign up, do you ask a question did someone refer you, or how did you learn about us? So maybe you are getting clients that are referring, but you don't have the mechanism to track that or get that level of insight from them signing up. So that could also be, we've seen that with some of our portfolio companies where if it is word of mouth, they might say they might ask a question hey, what do you use for this? And then they say, oh, I use that. And then they just go Google search you. And then, they sign up, and you'll never know it's a referral if you don't ask the question. So I think there's some of those mechanisms as well.
All right. I think that's all I have to say about that. So
on to the next one.
All right, we'll move on to the next one. If you've got a live question, drop it in the chat. We will prioritize it. But until then, the questions submitted in advance, data in your bio, calendar, submit your question in advance, get a little bit more breathing when you get in the comments. We do prioritize the comments one, so feel free to drop it in the comments. But with that, we're going to move on to question 2, which is actually question 3, because we started with question 4. All right, so this is our penultimate question, I guess, is my way of saying that. This is B2B SaaS for electricians running small businesses with 1 to 5 employees. They hit 83,000 ARR last month with job scheduling software, targeting those electricians. Churn's been creeping up though. It's now at 9% monthly. When we call churn, customers half say business is slow, cutting costs, and half say went back to pen and paper. It's simpler. How worried should we be? Is this just normal churn or a signal that our product isn't sticky enough? Electricians are practical people. If something doesn't directly make them money or save significant time, they'll drop it. Our software is definitely helpful, but maybe not essential, ? Also, the residential construction market has been soft the last few months. I have thoughts, but did you want to go first, or?
Go for it. I went first.
All right. Your churn is concerning. I'm just going to be honest. Yeah, it's concerning. and I'm a little concerned for you. I'm not gonna lie, but couple things, like the half say business is slow and they're cutting costs, and the other half saying they went back to pen and paper and simpler. My guess is those are the same group, and one is just being politer than the other one. I'm guessing that they're actually just not getting as much value as they thought, and they're, as you said, that they're practical people. They're not getting. You don't actually say how much they're paying, and let's say I don't have enough information to do the math. But however many that you're actually getting here, they're just not finding it worth paying that dollar amount. And so, yeah, that blows. Sorry. But I actually don't think that it's a question of being sticky. I don't think that's the issue. I think it's too early to talk about sticky. You're at 9% monthly churn, which I don't think is going to be a sticky thing. I don't know how long you've been around or what your lifetime value is or your like average retention is. Like, there's a lot that I don't know from here, but I'm going to assume, just based on your status, that they're not sticking around long enough for it to be about stickiness. They're actively canceling, and I think it's going to be much more about just not creating enough value, and that the stickiness is going to be an important factor, but probably going to come later. I think saying that pen and paper is simpler is a little bit of a flag for the value creation mechanism, and we see this a lot. So this goes back to what we've talked about a lot of times, which is what I call the magic wand problem. This is when you tell somebody, like, hey, do you have this problem? Oh my God, I have that problem. And then you say, oh, if I could solve it for you, would you pay money? And they'd say, yeah, sure, I'd pay you money to get rid of this problem for me. And the problem with that is that you're offering them a magic wand, right? Like, I just go, boop, problem solved. And that doesn't work that way. Not only does it cost money, which is the only thing that was mentioned in there, but it also costs brain, it costs resources, like other non-monetary resources, people. It takes time. And there are other things that you usually have to sacrifice in order to get that. So in order to replace a pen and paper process with a digital tool, what else is changing? As an example, maybe your field technicians, instead of filling something out on a clipboard, have to have the app installed on their phone. Well, pen and paper is simpler because now all of our technicians have to install this app, and we have to be responsible for doing tech support on this app and making sure they can all use it and get all the account provisioning, and there's all this other stuff that are costs for the original thing. And so when you go from magic wand to the real world, we often see that it would have been perfect if it was a magic wand, but there are no magic wands. And when you ask them to pay the actual cost it takes to implement the solution in the way you've defined it, it's not worth it anymore. Not just because of the money, and probably not because of the money, just based on your numbers here. So it's not about the money; it's about the other costs that they're maybe taking in order to have to use the tool that makes it not worth it. And this is where we get also to that gap between at the Traction Lab. What we have is our first two validation points in B2B SaaS. And so the first one is that there's an urgent problem with a willing buyer. You seem to have that here. But the second one is that it's the right solution for that buyer. So that means that the way that we're solving this problem, the how that we're solving this problem is the right way that they need that problem solved. And I think I'm reading between the lines a lot here, but what I'm feeling here is that how is wrong, and that it's that the way that we have this defined at the moment is not the right way to solve the problem. And that doesn't mean that it's 100% off. It could still be 5% off or 10% off. Well, probably not 5%, but it could be like 20% off. And maybe there's something from a UX perspective that we can solve with something, or there maybe some way that we could simplify something in there. But it is going to mean having a conversation with those customers and actually diving a little bit deeper into the reasons that they're churning, not just asking why you leave, but when they say it's simpler, say in what way is it simpler? And then it might be worth asking some price sensitivity questions, right? Like at what price would this be, way too expensive to consider, and then at the end of the day, it's kind of way too cheap that it feels like it can't possibly be reliable. And then what's a price that's high but maybe worth, and a price that's a great deal for it. And if by asking those four pieces, you can, I was going to say triangulate, but that's not quadrangulate maybe to what price actually makes sense. And if you do that, what you might find in a situation like this from the users who've actually used you is that the way you're quadrangulating down is to a price that's much lower than what you're offering now, and that's a signal of that disconnect between the value that you promised at the outset that they signed up for, that magic wand, and then the actual value that they're getting out of it. So if you lower the price enough, how much do we have to lower the price for those other costs to be made up for?
I don't know how much more there is to add. That was I should have gone first, but no, I think the biggest thing that was standing out for me was kind of where you were ending was understanding like what is the mechanism for them to integrate this new solution into their existing processes, and I'd be curious of those that are churning. Are they like early customers where the process of like going and integrating a new process or the new software, they're not getting that immediate value based on the effort they have to ultimately employ in order to get the solution off the ground, especially amidst maybe a slowing market. So they're not seeing that you have to increase the value if they are a little bit more cost sensitive related to that. So that would be kind of where my focus would be. So I would interrogate a little bit more about who is churning, having a conversation with them, and like where in the life cycle of these paying customers are they? Are they like brand new customers and that aren't getting value, or are they like down the line they've been using it for 6 months and they didn't see the value? That's a little bit different conversation to have. And then additionally, like, are they different types of small businesses? So are the ones that are churning are the 1 to 2 person team that maybe doesn't have the capacity to go through the onboarding process or whatever is necessary, or is it the big team that's not seeing the value or whatever that might be? So I think there needs to be a little bit more interrogation of the numbers versus it just being like we have churn and that's a problem, which it is, but let's understand it more deeply.
All right.
Cool.
Well said. We have one final question in the queue. This is your cue to get your question in the queue so that we can answer when we're done with this. We'll probably have a few extra minutes for any live questions you guys want to ask or anything you want to shoot the shit about, talk about, opine about, share your opinions about. And if you have thoughts on any of the questions that we've been tackling here, feel free to share those as well. We'd love to share your thoughts with everyone here as well. Okay, let's do it. B2B SaaS for podcast producers working with multiple shows and clients. All right, cool. They've got an MVP in progress, and they're building a project management software specifically for podcast production workflows. They've talked to probably 50 podcast producers at this point. They all hate their current setup, random mix of Asana, Google Sheets, email, Slack, whatever. They all say they'd love something built for podcasting specifically, but when I ask them to describe their workflow so we can build for it, no 2 producers do things the same way at all. Some edit in Descript, some in Adobe Audition, some handle show notes, some don't, some manage socials, some just deliver the audio file. I'm kind of stuck. Build for one workflow and hope others adapt, or build something super flexible that might be too complicated. What do you think, Cameron?
I think for me, it's very focused on the solution. Like I still don't understand what problem they're solving for. Right? Like it's like, oh, well, like it's the process, it's the workflow, but like, what's the problem with the workflow? Is it that they're not able to get the episodes out in an efficient manner? Is it that the episodes aren't done well? Like, what is the value you're seeking to create? But also, like, what fundamental problem are you solving for? And I need to reread it, but I can't really speak to exactly what problem they're solving outside of they see this workflow and that there's many different things. But did they articulate that that's a problem, or they're sufficiently getting whatever they need to do done related to it? So that's where I would focus, is like, it's kind of like building a solution while hunting for the problem versus like loving and understanding the problem and then building the solution to suit, right? So when we think of our validation roadmap, it's not the right solution for the problem. It's an urgent problem with a willing buyer, and then it's the right solution for that problem. And so you can't really put the cart before the horse, or else you're not going to go anywhere.
Honestly, that's exactly where I was going to go with it as well. We're 100% on the same page, and I think the pattern that I'm seeing in this, because again, like if you do any work in our space, we just train ourselves, either intentionally or not, to be pattern recognition machines, right? We see so many deals, we see so many startups that we start to see the patterns in things. And like, so the pattern that I'm seeing here, that doesn't mean it's right? That's just the pattern that I'm seeing in this, is that you've identified the problem of, oh, there's just too many tools and I have to use too many tools. Well, what if we were to string all the tools together? What if we were to do an all-in-one tool? the operating system for whatever. And there's always startups every single day launching, creating something like that in some space, and almost none of them ever work. And the reason is that I think maybe where Cameron was pointing out a little bit, at least what I heard in there, was that the underlying problem isn't one that's fundamentally solvable, right? That because the underlying problem is just I have all these tools, not I can't get an episode out, or not I can't do X, or there's this particular pain that I have. And because of that, the you don't have a problem, you have an entire category of problems. And we can't solve for this category of problems because, to your point, everybody's doing something different. And what they don't like is that there are a bunch of different tools. And if you were to kind of connect this back to what I was saying in the previous question, if you were to wave a magic wand to connect all these tools together, they'd be happy, right? But you can't do that. And so what we're going to have to do instead is build something to replace it. And that's going to require us making decisions on their behalf. And some group of them might be happy with that, but a lot of them are going to say, no, I like the way that I'm doing it. And it's not that the way that they're doing it is better. It's a devil you know, devil you don't thing. And they are fine. They're happy with the devil they got, right? And so if you try to go and change that on them, the cost to get what would have been that magic wand, the cost to get that integration to solve the problem is not sufficient to cover the benefit that they're getting, or I mean the other way around. So they're not going to do it. And so it's kind of like similar things. That's a pattern I'm saying. So my question is actually going to be, in addition to what is the problem, is who is the person that has it? Is there some type of podcast booster? Because it's podcast producers with multiple shows and clients. I mean, that could be anything from the top 5 studios to, some indie guys that I know here in Sacramento, right? So who are we actually talking about here? And are there commonalities or similarities, in that process? Who is more likely to have something super custom? Is it the guy who's working on 5 shows, or the studio working on 50 shows? Like, who is it that's actually going to experience that in a way that is replicable in some fashion? And can we have this process of doing that if we were to use that, where it's easier to get a wedge into the market, then can we maybe at some point when we cross the chasm, convince the other guys who have their own hack together workflow that this new workflow is better and all the big boys are using it, so they can sign up and maybe try something different because you have that reputation and you've crossed the chasm. But for now, who's the early adopters? Like, what's the pain you're actually solving, and who actually has that? And can you break this customer down a little bit, maybe identify some of that? But absent to that, we're again just at this, well, we're just going to string everything together that is inherently valuable, and it's not inherently valuable, or at least it's not actionably valuable, I guess I should say. So that's all I got.
That's all, folks.
All right. Well, we'll give the minute or so as we vamp here for your final questions to come in, because there is a delay on the LinkedIn side. On the YouTube side, not so much, but there is a delay on the LinkedIn side, so we're going to give a second for the LinkedIn folks to catch up. If you got a question, drop it in there. In the meantime, we've got all kinds of fun stuff coming away. It's a great time to get into the Traction Lab ecosystem, by which I mean, sign up for our Substack, our free Substack or something like that. Because we've got not only all kinds of content coming out, we've got the Traction Lab podcast that comes out every week. We've got this office hours that happen every week on LinkedIn and YouTube. We've got some YouTube videos that we're putting out. We've got, again, multiple different newsletters that we're putting up. But also, we've got some really fun things that are coming at the beginning of the year that we're really excited about. So you want to be kind of in the loop for that. We're always accepting applications for the Traction Lab itself. So if you are a pre-seed or seed stage company looking to get your next major milestone and not have the time using science and to go for that world of uncertainty to the world of high conviction, then hit us up, and we'd be happy to have a conversation about your startup and see if it would be a good fit for to step into the lab. And with that, Cameron, any great stuff you got going on in the Carlson Center that we want to plug here?
No, we just we finished our Global Entrepreneurship Week, and we have a boot camp tonight and tomorrow. So if you are looking for plans tonight and tomorrow, come join us, do some startup stuff. But other than that, plug into the Traction Lab ecosystem, and we look forward to supporting and serving you. So it looks like we
did. We vamped long enough.
We filibustered long enough as always. So.
All right, you guys always come through for us. We appreciate it. I heard one researcher say for things like AI, there are more companies than ideas. Isn't that always the case, though?
There are more
yes.
than ideas.
and I get what he's saying. So, or what they're saying. So, yes, there are always more companies and ideas, in the sense that if we're talking about viable ideas, right, like actually viable problem spaces, then yes, there are always more companies and ideas. But there's, I mean, if we set aside all the crazy cockamamie schemes, I think what I'm hearing here is that it's on steroids here, and so that you have a lot of people who are actually spinning up these AI companies. There's AI for X, and there isn't really any inherent value, like that they're leaning into the value creation mechanism of AI, but they're not actually solving a problem in any way. And so in that space, or in that sense, what they're doing is creating a company around which there isn't even the real underlying idea, and that it's just glomming onto something else and calling it AI for X. That's kind of my take on that. So you're right, and I think I also see what they're pointing out, that it's the same thing, but kind of on steroids in a negative way. I don't know if you hear that differently, Cameron.
No, I think they add to that last point is that thinking through, you're not selling AI, you're selling the like value that it's generating or the benefits that comes from it. And so I think oftentimes people are like, we're an AI powered platform for blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, how is their life better having used AI versus pen and paper or whatever that might be, right? So that's ultimately at the end of the day, what they're purchasing is the value, not the, AI component of it.
Or at least we hope, right?
Yeah, that's true.
We hope. Yeah, we hope. So, well, I think that is about that. We'll give another second in case there's a follow-up from Michael or anything that anybody else wants to drop into the chat.
Cool.
But thanks, Michael, for the question. It was an awesome question. Appreciate it. Cameron, anything else we got here?
No, I think we're good.
All right. Well,
all right. Well,
cool.
Thank you all. We will see you next week. We'll be back and ready to rock and roll. So plug on in and be sure to like and subscribe.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, guys. All right.